Miles Carter woke up in the wrong woman's tent with a campground official demanding his arrest. But the woman holding the coffee pot wasn't panicking. She was calculating. Within 24 hours, that mistake would pull him into a fight he didn't start, against a man who buried deadlines like landmines, and force him to choose between walking away clean or standing beside someone who'd already decided he was worth the risk. If you want to see how a wrong turn becomes the right fight, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The fire had chewed through 60 acres of dry pine before the wind finally died. Miles Carter had spent 14 hours beating it back, digging line, hauling hose, breathing ash until his lungs felt coated in it. When the incident commander finally called it contained, Miles didn't celebrate. He just peeled off his gloves, drank a bottle of water that tasted like smoke, and pointed his truck toward the nearest campground that took late arrivals. Pine Ridge Campground sat 12 miles south of the burn zone, tucked along a slow-moving river that reflected the late afternoon sun in lazy ripples. The main office was already closed when Miles pulled in, but there was a self-check-in board with a map and a lockbox for fees. He scanned the diagram, found Site 47 marked as available, dropped two 20s in the slot, and drove the narrow gravel loop until he spotted the number carved into a wooden post. The tent was already set up. Miles sat in his truck for a full minute, staring at the dark green dome tent that shouldn't have been there. His brain was too fried to make sense of it. Maybe he'd read the map wrong. Maybe someone had moved sites without updating the board. Maybe he was so tired he'd driven to the wrong campground entirely. He checked the post again. 47. He checked the map. 47. He rubbed his eyes, tasted ash on his lips, and made a decision born purely from exhaustion. If someone was inside, he'd apologize and move. If the tent was empty, he'd collapse for a few hours and sort it out in the morning. Miles killed the engine, grabbed his pack, and walked over. The tent was silent. No light inside. No gear scattered around the entrance. He crouched, unzipped the flap slowly, and leaned in. Empty. The interior smelled faintly of lavender and something else, clean, like dryer sheets. A sleeping bag was rolled neatly in one corner. A small battery-powered lantern sat beside it. No shoes, no clothes, no indication anyone was coming back soon. Miles didn't think. He crawled inside, kicked off his boots, and fell onto the sleeping pad without even unrolling his own bag. His body shut down the moment his head hit the nylon floor. He didn't dream. He didn't move. He just stopped. Fine. The sound of a zipper woke him. Miles opened his eyes to unfamiliar darkness and the distinct awareness that he was not alone. A figure crouched at the tent entrance, backlit by early morning gray. His hand moved instinctively toward his belt, but he wasn't wearing his radio, wasn't wearing much of anything except dirt and the smell of burnt timber. The figure didn't scream, didn't run, just stayed very still. "You're in my tent," a woman's voice said, calm, almost curious. Miles sat up too fast and immediately regretted it. His head pounded. His shoulders felt like they'd been beaten with a shovel. He blinked at the woman now sitting cross-legged just inside the entrance, her expression more thoughtful than alarmed. His voice came out rough. He cleared his throat. "I thought this site was empty." It wasn't. I checked the board. It said 47 was available. She tilted her head slightly, studying him the way someone might study a stray dog that wandered onto their porch. Wary, but not hostile. She was maybe 30, with dark hair pulled into a low ponytail and sharp eyes that didn't miss much. She wore a faded hoodie and jeans, and her hands rested loosely on her knees like she'd already decided whether he was a threat. "You're a firefighter," she said. Not a question. Miles looked down at himself. His shirt had the CAL FIRE logo half obscured by soot. His pants were streaked with retardant. He smelled like he'd been dipped in a chimney. "Yeah." "Wildfire?" "Yeah." She nodded once, like that explained everything. Then she reached behind her and pulled a small camp stove and a tin coffee pot into the tent. "You want coffee?" Miles stared at her. "You're making coffee." "I was going to make it anyway. You being here doesn't change that." "I'm in your tent." "I noticed." "You're not—" He stopped, unsure how to finish the sentence. "Upset? Scared? Calling the cops?" She struck a match, lit the stove, and set the pot on top. You're exhausted. You made a mistake. You're not dangerous. She glanced at him. Are you dangerous? No. Then coffee seems reasonable. Miles didn't know what to do with that. He'd expected yelling, maybe panic. At minimum, a demand that he leave immediately. Instead, this woman was brewing coffee like he was an inconvenient but solvable problem. I'm sorry, he said. I'll get out of your way. Finish your coffee first. She adjusted the flame. You look like you need it. The water started to heat, a soft hiss filling the silence. Miles watched her hands move with practiced efficiency, measuring grounds, checking the temperature, adjusting the stove without wasted motion. Everything about her was controlled, deliberate. I'm Harper, she said, not looking up. Miles. Miles the firefighter who doesn't check tents before climbing into them. In my defense, I thought it was empty. It looked empty because I was at the shower house. She poured water into the pot. I got back about 10 minutes ago and saw your truck. You didn't call anyone. I wanted to see who'd be dumb enough or desperate enough to crash in a stranger's tent first. She looked at him then, her gaze direct. Turns out it was both. Miles almost smiled. Almost. The coffee pot started to perk. The smell cut through the lingering stench of smoke in his nose, and for the first time in hours, Miles felt something other than bone-deep fatigue. He felt off balance. This woman, Harper, wasn't reacting the way people usually did. She wasn't performing calm. She was calm. Like she'd already run the numbers and decided he wasn't worth the panic. Why aren't you freaking out? He asked. Harper poured coffee into 2 enamel mugs and handed him one. Would it help? Most people would. I'm not most people. She took a sip, watching him over the rim. You're a firefighter. You're covered in ash. You look like you haven't slept in a day. You didn't bring a weapon. You didn't touch my stuff. You apologized. She shrugged. Freaking out seemed inefficient. Miles took a drink. The coffee was strong, bitter, perfect. You always this logical? Always. Before he could respond, a sharp voice cut through the morning air. Excuse me? Is someone in there? Harper's expression didn't change, but something tightened around her eyes. She set her mug down and leaned toward the entrance. Yes? The zipper yanked open from the outside, and a woman in a campground uniform crouched into view. She was maybe 50, with short gray hair, a clipboard, and the kind of rigid posture that suggested she took rulebooks very seriously. Her name tag read Brenda Pike, site manager. Brenda's gaze moved from Harper to Miles, and her face hardened. What is going on here? Harper's tone stayed even. Good morning, Brenda. Don't good morning me. Who is this? Brenda jabbed a finger at Miles. This is Miles. Did you register him? No. Then he's trespassing. Miles set his coffee down and started to stand, but Harper put a hand on his knee, light, but enough to stop him. He made a mistake, Harper said. The board showed Site 47 as available. He didn't realize someone was already here. Brenda's eyes narrowed. The board is updated every evening. If it said this site was open, then it was open when he checked in. It wasn't open, Harper said. I've been here since yesterday afternoon. Then you didn't check in properly. I checked in at 3:15. I have the receipt. Brenda's mouth thinned. Let me see it. Harper reached into a small pack near the tent wall and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She handed it over without a word. Brenda scanned it, her jaw working. This says Site 48. Harper took the receipt back, looked at it, and let out a slow breath. You're right, it does. Brenda's smile was sharp. So you're the one in the wrong site. I am. And he, Brenda pointed at Miles again, is in the wrong site. Correct. Which means this is an unauthorized occupancy situation. Brenda pulled a pen from her clipboard. I'm going to need both of your IDs. Miles finally stood, his patience wearing thin. Look, this is just a mix-up. I'll move to another site, no harm done. Brenda didn't look at him. Unauthorized occupancy is a violation of campground policy. I'm required to document it. Document what? Miles said. I didn't know anyone was here. That's not my problem. Harper stood as well, her voice still calm but carrying an edge now. Brenda, we've already established what happened. I'm in the wrong site. He thought it was empty. We're both leaving. There's nothing to document. Brenda's pen hovered over her clipboard. You don't get to decide that. I'm not deciding anything. I'm stating facts. The fact is, I found a man in your tent who isn't registered. The fact is, you found two people who made clerical errors and are fixing them. But Brenda's face flushed. I could call the sheriff. Harper didn't blink. You could, but then you'd have to explain why you're escalating a paperwork mistake into a law enforcement issue. And I'd have to explain that I've camped here 6 times in the last 2 months without incident, and this is the first time you've shown up before 8 a.m. to check sites. The silence that followed was heavy. Brenda's knuckles went white around her pen. Are you threatening me? I'm suggesting that calling the sheriff over this would be a waste of everyone's time. Harper's voice stayed level. Including yours. Brenda stared at her for a long moment, then turned to Miles. ID, now. Miles pulled out his wallet and handed over his driver's license. Brenda copied the information onto her clipboard with deliberate slowness, her handwriting tight and angry. When she finished, she shoved the license back at him. You're both moving sites immediately. If I see either of you in the wrong spot again, I will call the sheriff. Understood? Understood, Harper said. Brenda shot her one last look, something personal and cold, then backed out of the tent and stalked away. Miles waited until her footsteps faded before he spoke. What the hell was that? Harper was already packing up the stove. That was Brenda being Brenda. She looked at you like you'd personally offended her. I did. Harper folded the stove into a compact square. Last month, I filed a complaint about the bathroom facilities. She didn't like it. So she's harassing you? She's doing her job, aggressively. Harper zipped up her pack. Welcome to Pine Ridge. Miles helped her collapse the tent, still trying to make sense of what just happened. Harper worked with the same efficiency she'd shown making coffee. No wasted motion, no unnecessary conversation. Within 10 minutes, the site was cleared. Harper shouldered her pack and looked at him. Where are you supposed to be? 47, apparently. That's 2 sites over. She pointed. I'm headed to 48, which is right next to you. You're staying? I have work here. What kind of work? Harper started walking. The kind that requires a lot of coffee and very little sleep. Miles fell into step beside her. You always this evasive. You always this curious about strangers you accidentally sleep next to? Despite everything, despite the exhaustion, the confrontation, the sheer absurdity of the last 20 minutes, Miles laughed. It felt rusty, but it was real. Harper glanced at him, and something in her expression softened, just a fraction. You should get some actual rest. You look like death. I feel like it. Then sleep. I'll make sure Brenda doesn't circle back with handcuffs. You don't have to do that. Harper stopped at the edge of Site 48 and set her pack down. I know. She looked at him, her gaze steady. But I'm going to anyway. Miles didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded, turned toward Site 47, and set up his tent in silence. By the time he crawled inside, Harper was already at her own site, setting up her stove again like nothing unusual had happened. He fell asleep to this faint smell of fresh coffee and the sound of water moving over stones. When Miles woke again, it was late afternoon. His body still ached, but the fog in his head had lifted. He crawled out of his tent, stretched, and immediately noticed 2 things. 1, Harper's site was empty. 2, there was a note pinned to his tent. He pulled it free. The handwriting was neat, efficient. If you're awake before 6, there's a meeting at the pavilion. You're invited. Miles checked his watch. 5:45. He should have ignored it. He'd stumbled into this woman's life by accident, caused her trouble with the campground manager, and had no reason to get more involved. The smart move was to thank her, pack up, and leave. But Miles had spent 14 hours fighting fire, and something about Harper's calm, unflinching presence made him want to know what she was fighting. He grabbed a clean shirt, washed his face at the spigot, and headed toward the pavilion. The pavilion sat at the center of the campground, a large covered structure with picnic tables, bulletin boards, and a stone fireplace that hadn't been used in years. When Miles arrived, a group of about a dozen people were already gathered around one of the tables, and Harper stood at the head, pointing to a large calendar spread out in front of her. So if we move the vendor check-in to Friday morning instead of Thursday night, we save on overnight fees and reduce congestion, Harper was saying. Her voice carried the same calm authority she'd used with Brenda, but here it was clear she was in charge. A man in his 50s with silver hair and a tailored jacket leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. And if the vendors don't show up Friday morning? They will, Harper said. I've already confirmed arrival times with all 16 of them. What if there's traffic? Then they call me and we adjust. What if they don't call? Harper's expression didn't change, but Miles saw her jaw tighten just slightly. Then we handle it, like we handle everything else. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You're very confident. I'm very prepared. Preparation doesn't guarantee success. No, Harper said, but it improves the odds significantly. The man's smile sharpened. I hope you're right. The council's watching this one closely. Harper met his gaze. I know. The man stood, adjusted his jacket, and walked away without another word. The rest of the group shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances. One woman, younger, maybe mid-20s, leaned toward Harper. He's going to make this difficult, isn't he? Harper folded the calendar. He already is. Miles stepped forward. Harper's eyes flicked to him, and for a second, something almost like relief crossed her face. You came, she said. You invited me. I wasn't sure you'd show. Miles glanced at the dispersing group. What was that about? Harper tucked the calendar under her arm. That was the Summer Solstice Festival Planning Committee, and that... She nodded toward the man in the tailored jacket, now talking to someone near the parking lot, was Grant Holloway, committee chair, city councilman, and the person currently trying to make sure this festival doesn't happen. Why? Harper started walking and Miles followed. Because I'm the one coordinating it. He doesn't like you. He doesn't like that I got the position instead of someone he recommended. She kept her pace steady, her tone matter of fact. So now he's looking for reasons to pull my approval. Can he do that? If he finds a code violation, a safety issue, or any documentation gap, yes, absolutely. Harper stopped near the edge of the river, where the light was starting to fade into gold. Which is why everything has to be perfect. Miles studied her. She stood with her arms crossed, staring at the water, her shoulders tight. She wasn't afraid, she was bracing. How long have you been working on this? He asked. 4 months? And he's been undermining you the whole time. Not the whole time, just the last 6 weeks, since I refused to hire his nephew as a security contractor. Miles felt something shift in his chest. Recognition. He'd seen this before. People in power who used rules as weapons, who buried the important details and waited for you to miss them. What do you need? He asked. Harper turned to look at him, her eyes searching his face. Why are you asking? Because I know what it looks like when someone's setting traps. He met her gaze. And you just made me coffee when you could have called the cops. Seems like the least I can do is ask if you need help. For a long moment, Harper didn't say anything. Then slowly she nodded. I need someone who knows code compliance, she said. Fire safety, crowd management, emergency access. Someone who can check my work and tell me if I'm missing anything. I can do that. You're a firefighter, not an inspector. I've done enough inspections to know what red flags look like. Harper studied him again, and this time her expression softened. Why would you do this? Miles thought about the way she'd handled Brenda that morning, the way she'd assessed him without panicking. The way she'd made coffee like trust was just another problem to solve with logic and consistency. Because you didn't have to make me coffee, he said. But you did. Harper's mouth curved, just barely. Not quite a smile, but close. Okay, she said. Let's get to work. Over the next 2 days, Miles learned 3 things about Harper Lane. 1, she didn't sleep much. He'd see her light on at 4 in the morning, updating spreadsheets and sending emails before most people's alarms went off. 2, she trusted systems, not people. Every decision she made was backed by documentation, receipts, timestamps, email trails. She didn't assume anything would go right. She built redundancies. 3, she was good at her job, scary good, the kind of coordinator who anticipated problems 3 steps ahead and had solutions ready before anyone else saw the issue. But Grant Holloway was better at sabotage. On the third day, Harper showed up at Miles's campsite with a printed email and a look on her face that was pure, controlled fury. "He moved the inspection," she said. Miles took the paper. It was from the county fire marshal's office, rescheduling the festival site inspection from June 18th to June 12th, 6 days earlier than planned. "When did you get this?" 20 minutes ago. It was buried in the minutes from yesterday's committee meeting. No direct notification, just a line item in a document he knew I wouldn't see until this morning. Miles scanned the email again. "Can he do that?" "If the chair requests an earlier inspection due to scheduling conflicts, yes." Harper's voice was tight. "And now I have 4 days instead of 10 to finish all the safety improvements. What's left?" "Permanent signage, 2 additional fire extinguisher stations, regrading the access road, and a full equipment audit." She looked at him. "I can't do it alone." Miles folded the email and handed it back. "Then you won't." They worked through the night. Miles drove to the festival site, a wide meadow at the edge of town with a temporary stage, vendor booths, and a gravel access road that turned into a mud trap every time it rained. Harper had maps, checklists, and a laser focus that didn't waver even when the work got repetitive. She marked positions for new extinguisher stations while Miles installed the mounts. She photographed every fix with timestamps while he regraded the road with a borrowed tractor and gravel from a supplier who owed her a favor. She built a binder, thick, tabbed, cross-referenced, while Miles double-checked measurements and code citations. By the time the sun came up on inspection day, Harper had a compliance file that could survive a forensic audit. And Grant Holloway was waiting for them at the site entrance with a cameraman. Harper stopped the truck. Miles looked at her. "He's recording this," Harper said quietly. "Yeah." "He's going to try to make me look incompetent on camera." "Probably." Harper's hands tightened on the wheel. Then she took a breath, released it, and opened the door. "Let's go." They walked toward Grant and the fire marshal, a middle-aged man named Ken Ruiz, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Grant's smile was wide, camera-ready. "Harper, right on time, we're just getting started." Harper didn't smile back. "Good morning, Grant." "Inspector Ruiz." Ken nodded. "Miss Lane." Grant gestured toward the meadow. "Ken was just telling me how thorough these inspections can be. Lots of small details people miss." "Good thing I don't miss details," Harper said. Grant's smile thinned. "We'll see." The inspection took 2 hours. Ken checked every extinguisher, every exit route, every electrical connection. He measured clearances, reviewed permits, tested equipment, and Harper followed him with her binder, cross-referencing every checkpoint with photos, receipts, and code sections. Grant trailed behind them, camera rolling, asking questions designed to sound helpful, but built to create doubt. "Are you sure that's the right bracket? Wasn't that section supposed to be completed last week? I thought the county required metal poles, not wood." Every time Harper answered with a document, a photo, a receipt, Ken started looking annoyed. Not with Harper, but with Grant. When they reached the final checkpoint, the access road, Grant made his move. "Ken, I'm concerned about the drainage here," Grant said, pointing to a shallow dip in the gravel. "If it rains, this could flood and block emergency vehicles." Ken crouched, examined the road, and stood up. "It's graded to county standards." "But what if he—" "It's graded to county standards," Ken repeated, his tone flat. "And Ms. Lane provided documentation showing it was inspected and approved 2 days ago." Harper handed Ken the form. He glanced at it, nodded, and made a note on his clipboard. Grant's jaw worked. "I just think—" "Mr. Holloway," Ken said, turning to face him, "I appreciate your concern, but I'm the inspector, not you." Grant's smile froze. Ken turned to Harper. "You've got everything in order, Ms. Lane. I'm marking this as passed." Harper's shoulders dropped, just slightly. Relief she didn't show on her face. "Thank you, Inspector." Ken shook her hand, nodded to Miles, and walked back to his truck without acknowledging Grant. Grant stood there, camera still rolling, his face tight. Harper walked past him without a word. Miles followed. When they reached Harper's truck, she sat in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead. "You okay?" Miles asked. Harper didn't answer right away, then quietly, "He's not done." "I know." She looked at him. "You don't have to stay for this." Miles thought about that. about the easy choice, about going back to his station, his shifts, his life. Then he thought about the woman who'd made him coffee when she could have called the cops. "I'm staying," he said. Harper held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Okay." She started the engine and they drove back toward the campground in silence. Behind them, Grant Holloway stood in the empty meadow, still holding his camera, still planning. The notification came through at 11:30 that night. Harper was sitting at the picnic table outside her tent, her laptop screen the only light in the darkened campground, when her phone buzzed. She picked it up, read the message, and went very still. Miles was cleaning his camp stove 20 feet away when he heard her say a single word, quiet but sharp enough to carry. "No." He looked up. Harper was staring at her phone like it had just delivered news of a natural disaster. "What happened?" Harper didn't answer immediately. She read the message again, then set the phone down with deliberate care, like she was afraid she might throw it otherwise. "Grant just called an emergency public hearing," she said. "Tomorrow at 10 a.m. Miles walked over. "On what grounds?" "Concerns about public safety and resource allocation for the festival." Harper's voice was flat. "He's claiming the inspection was rushed and that I used personal connections to influence the outcome." "That's bullshit. That's politics." Harper picked up her phone again, scrolled through the message. "He's framing it as transparency, making sure the community understands how their tax dollars are being spent, ensuring proper oversight. He's trying to bury you in front of an audience." "Yes." Miles sat down across from her. The night air was cool, carrying the sound of the river and the occasional rustle of wind through the pines. Harper's face was lit by the blue glow of her laptop, shadows cutting sharp lines across her cheekbones. "Can you skip it?" Miles asked. "No. If I don't show, he'll say I'm avoiding accountability." Harper closed her laptop. "If I do show, he'll have a room full of people primed to think I'm cutting corners." "So you go in prepared." "I am prepared. That's not the problem." She rubbed her eyes. "The problem is that Grant's good at this. He'll ask questions that sound reasonable but are designed to make me look defensive. He'll bring up costs I can't control and timelines I didn't set. And even if I answer everything perfectly, people will walk out of that room thinking there's smoke." Miles leaned back, thinking. He'd seen this tactic before, not in city council meetings, but in incident debriefs when someone wanted to shift blame. You couldn't fight it by being right. You had to control the narrative before it started. "Then don't play defense," he said. Harper looked at him. "What do you mean?" "He's setting the frame, public safety, resource allocation, transparency. Those are his words, and if you argue against them, you're already losing." Miles tapped the table. "You need to reframe it." "To what?" "Process integrity, documentation, proof of compliance." He met her eyes. "You don't defend the festival. You defend the system. Show that you followed every rule, met every standard, and that anyone questioning it is questioning the inspector who signed off on it." Harper was quiet for a moment, her gaze sharp and considering. Then slowly, she nodded. "That could work." "It will work. But you need to walk in with more than a binder. You need witnesses, timelines, evidence that Grant manipulated the process, not you." "I have the email where he moved the inspection without notifying me directly." "That's a start. What else?" Harper opened her laptop again, pulled up a folder. "Meeting minutes where he voted against extending my prep time. Texts from vendors confirming Grant told them the festival might be canceled. A recording of the committee meeting where he questioned my qualifications." Miles raised an eyebrow. "You recorded it?" "I record everything." Harper's expression was grim. "I've been documenting since week 2 when I realized he was going to be a problem." "Then you're not going in there to defend yourself. You're going in there to put him on the record." Harper stared at him, something shifting in her expression. Not relief, not quite hope, but a kind of cold, focused determination that Miles recognized from his own work. The moment when you stop reacting and start executing. "I need to rebuild the presentation," she said. "I'll help." You don't have to." "I know." Miles stood. "Get your files. We've got 10 hours. They worked through the night for the second time in a week. Harper pulled every document she had. Emails, meeting notes, inspector reports, vendor contracts. Miles organized them chronologically, cross-referencing dates and flagging inconsistencies in Grant's communications. They built a timeline that was so airtight it didn't leave room for interpretation. By the time the sun came up, Harper had a presentation that wasn't a defense. It was an indictment. At 9:30, they drove to City Hall. The building was older, red brick with white columns and a bronze plaque near the entrance commemorating its construction in 1947. Inside, the hallway smelled like floor wax and old paper. Harper walked with her shoulders back, her binder under one arm, her expression unreadable. Miles stayed 2 steps behind her, scanning the crowd that was already gathering in the meeting room. Maybe 40 people. Some he recognized from the committee meeting, others who looked like curious residents or local reporters. Grant stood near the front, talking to a man in a suit who was taking notes. When Grant saw Harper, his smile widened. Harper. Glad you could make it. Wouldn't miss it, Harper said evenly. Grant's gaze slid to Miles. And you brought a friend. I brought a witness. Grant's smile didn't falter, but something hardened in his eyes. This is a public hearing, not a trial. Then there's nothing to worry about. The council president, a woman in her 60s named Carol Mendez, called the meeting to order at 10 sharp. The room quieted. Carol read the agenda item in a brisk, no-nonsense tone that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. Emergency hearing regarding the Summer Solstice Festival Coordination and Compliance Review. Mr. Holloway, you called this session? You have the floor. Grant stood, buttoning his jacket. He moved to the front of the room like he owned it, his posture relaxed, his tone warm and concerned. Thank you, Madam President. I want to start by saying that I have the utmost respect for Ms. Lane and the work she's done on this festival. This hearing isn't about assigning blame. It's about ensuring we're meeting our obligations to the public. Harper sat motionless, her hands folded on the table in front of her. Grant continued. Over the past few weeks, several community members have raised concerns about the festival's budget, timeline, and safety measures. Given that this event is funded by taxpayer dollars and will bring thousands of people into our town, I believe those concerns deserve a transparent review. He clicked a remote, and a slide appeared on the projector screen behind him. It showed a budget breakdown with several line items highlighted in red. As you can see, we've exceeded our initial projections in 3 categories: security, infrastructure, and permits. I'd like to understand why those costs increased and whether they were necessary. Harper didn't look at the screen. She was watching Grant. Carol turned to her. Miss Lane, would you like to respond? Harper stood. She didn't smile. She didn't soften her tone. She just spoke with the same calm precision she'd used to make coffee in a stranger's tent. Yes, Madam President. The cost increases Mr. Holloway highlighted are the result of scope changes requested by this committee, including Mr. Holloway, during the April and May planning sessions. I have the meeting minutes and email approvals for each one. She opened her binder, pulled out 3 printed documents, and handed copies to Carol and the council members. On April 14th, the committee voted to add a second security checkpoint at the vendor entrance. That added $1,200 to the security budget. On May 2nd, Mr. Holloway personally requested that we upgrade the stage platform to accommodate a larger sound system. That added $1,800 to infrastructure. And on May 9th, the county informed us that we needed an additional permit for alcohol sales, which we hadn't planned for, but which the committee approved unanimously. Carol scanned the documents. These are all in the record? Yes, ma'am. Grant's smile tightened. I'm not disputing that changes were made. I'm questioning whether those changes were cost-effective. They were necessary to meet the standards you required, Harper said. If you'd like to revisit those decisions, we can, but that would mean scaling back the festival scope, which would also mean refunding vendor fees and canceling contracts we've already signed. Grant shifted his weight. I'm not suggesting we cancel anything. I'm suggesting we need better financial oversight moving forward. Oversight was already in place. Every expenditure over $500 required committee approval, and I provided budget updates at every meeting. Harper's tone didn't change. If you felt oversight was lacking, you had multiple opportunities to raise that concern before now. A few people in the audience murmured. Grant's jaw tightened. Carol tapped her pen on the table. Mr. Holloway, do you have specific examples of financial mismanagement? Grant hesitated, just for a second. but it was enough. I have concerns about the inspection process, he said, pivoting. Ms. Lane was given an expedited review after the original date was moved up. I want to ensure that didn't compromise the thoroughness of the inspection. Harper didn't blink. The inspection date was moved up by you, Mr. Holloway, not by me. Grant's expression went carefully neutral. The date was adjusted due to scheduling conflicts. Scheduling conflicts that weren't communicated to me directly, Harper said. I found out about the change by reading the committee meeting minutes, 18 hours before the inspection was scheduled. She pulled another document from her binder and handed it to Carol. This is the email notification I received. It's dated June 8th at 9:42 a.m. The inspection was scheduled for June 12th at 8 a.m. That gave me less than 4 days to complete work that was originally planned for 10 days. Carol frowned. Mr. Holloway, is this accurate? Grant's smile was gone now. The change was noted in the official minutes. Noted in the minutes isn't the same as direct notification, Carol said. Was Ms. Lane contacted separately? The minutes are the official record. That's not what I asked. Grant's face flushed slightly. No, she was not contacted separately. The murmur in the audience grew louder. Carol held up a hand for silence. Ms. Lane, you said you had less than 4 days to complete the remaining work. Were you able to meet the inspection requirements? Yes, ma'am. How? Harper glanced at Miles. He gave her a small nod. I had help, Harper said. Miles Carter, a firefighter with CAL FIRE, volunteered his time to assist with compliance checks and code verification. Between the two of us, we completed all outstanding items and passed the inspection without deficiencies. Grant leaned forward. And what is Mr. Carter's relationship to you? The room went quiet. Harper's expression didn't change, but Miles saw her hands tighten just slightly on the edge of the binder. He's a professional who knows fire code and safety standards, Harper said, and a volunteer who offered to help when I was put in an impossible position. That's not what I asked. Miles stood. He hadn't planned to, but the insinuation in Grant's voice, the suggestion that Harper had done something improper, hit him the wrong way. I met Ms. Lane 4 days ago, Miles said, his voice carrying across the room. I have no financial stake in this festival, no business relationship with her, and no reason to lie for her. I helped because the work needed to be done, and she didn't have time to do it alone. Time she lost because the inspection was moved without warning. Grant turned to face him. And you just happened to be available. I was on leave after a wildfire rotation. So yes, I was available. Convenient. Miles's jaw tightened. If you're accusing me of something, say it clearly. Grant smiled. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm simply trying to understand how a coordinator who was supposedly overwhelmed managed to pass an inspection in record time. She passed because she'd already done the work, Miles said. All we did was accelerate the final installations and documentation. The inspector signed off because everything met code. If you have a problem with that, your issue is with the county fire marshal, not with Ms. Lane. Carol's pen stopped moving. She looked at Grant. Mr. Holloway, are you alleging that the inspection was conducted improperly? Grant's smile slipped. I'm suggesting that the circumstances warrant scrutiny. Based on what evidence? Based on the fact that evidence, Mr. Holloway, not feelings. Grant's mouth thinned. He glanced at the man in the suit, who shook his head slightly. I'd like to call for an independent review of the inspection report, Grant said finally. Carol sighed. Ms. Lane, do you have a copy of the inspection report? Harper handed it over. Carol read through it slowly, her expression unreadable. When she finished, she passed it to the other council members. This report is signed by Inspector Kenneth Ruiz and lists 0 deficiencies, Carol said. It also notes that all required documentation was provided at the time of inspection. Unless you have specific evidence of misconduct, Mr. Holloway, I see no grounds for an independent review. Grant's face went tight. I think the community deserves a festival that's safe and well-managed, Carol interrupted. And based on this report, that's exactly what Ms. Lane has delivered. She looked at Harper. Do you have anything else you'd like to add? Harper stood again. This time she didn't open her binder. She just spoke, her voice calm and clear. I'd like the record to reflect that over the past 6 weeks, I've received incomplete information, last-minute deadline changes, and repeated challenges to my authority, all of which have made it harder to do my job. Despite that, I've met every requirement, passed every inspection, and kept this festival on track. If there are concerns about how this project has been managed, I suggest we examine who's been creating obstacles and who's been solving them. The room was dead silent. Carol nodded slowly. Noted. Grant stood frozen, his jaw working. Then without another word, he turned and walked out of the room. The hearing ended 10 minutes later. Harper packed her binder with hands that were steady but moved a fraction slower than usual. Miles stayed close, watching the crowd disperse. A few people stopped to shake Harper's hand or offer quiet words of support. One older man, a vendor based on the logo on his jacket, gripped her shoulder. "You did good, kid. Don't let that bastard get in your head." Harper managed a faint smile. "I won't." When the room finally cleared, Carol approached. She looked tired. "That was a mess," Carol said. "Yes, ma'am. Grant's not going to let this go." "I know." Carol studied her for a long moment. "You handled yourself well in there, but you need to be careful. He's going to look for any mistake he can use against you." "Then I won't make any." Carol's expression softened slightly. "No one's perfect, Harper. Don't set yourself up to fail by trying to be." Harper didn't respond. Carol nodded to Miles, then left. Miles waited until they were alone before he spoke. "You okay?" Harper closed her binder and picked it up. "I'm functional." "That's not what I asked." She looked at him then, and for the first time since the hearing started, her mask slipped. Just a little, enough for him to see the exhaustion underneath. "I'm tired," she said quietly. "I'm tired of fighting someone who has more power, more connections, and more time to make my life difficult. I'm tired of having to be perfect just to be taken seriously. And I'm really, really tired of proving that I deserve a job I already earned." Miles didn't offer empty reassurances. He just nodded. "Yeah, that sounds exhausting." Harper's mouth quirked. Not quite a smile, but close. "You're a good listener, you know that?" "I've had practice." They walked out of the building together into late morning sun that felt too bright after the dim meeting room. Harper stopped on the steps, tilted her face toward the light, and took a slow breath. "What now?" Miles asked. Harper opened her eyes. "Now I go back to work. The festival's in 2 weeks, and I still have vendor coordination, volunteer scheduling, and about 100 other things that won't wait for Grant to finish his vendetta." You need help with any of it?" Harper looked at him, really looked at him, like she was trying to figure out why he kept offering. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Miles thought about that, about the easy answer and the real one. "Because you made me coffee," he said finally, "and because I don't like bullies." Harper held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Okay, I could use help with the volunteer training session tomorrow. It's mostly safety briefings and site orientation. Boring stuff." "I can do boring." "Good." Harper started down the steps. "Meet me at the site at 9. Miles watched her walk to her truck, shoulders straight, binder tucked under her arm like armor. He was pretty sure boring wasn't going to be the right word for whatever came next. But he showed up anyway. The festival site looked different in daylight with people scattered across it. Harper had gathered about 30 volunteers, mostly college students and a few retirees, and was walking them through the layout with the same methodical precision she applied to everything else. Miles handled the safety briefing, fire extinguisher locations, emergency exits, crowd management protocols. He kept it simple, practical, and made sure everyone knew where the first aid station would be. Afterward, Harper pulled him aside. "That was good. Clear. I've done a few of these. It shows." She glanced at her tablet. "I need to run vendor confirmations this afternoon. You want to come?" "You asking me on a date?" Harper didn't smile, but her eyes lightened slightly. "I'm asking if you want to spend 3 hours calling food trucks and confirming delivery times." "Sounds romantic." "It's really not." "I'm in." They spent the afternoon at Harper's campsite, working through her vendor list with the kind of efficiency that came from clear division of labor. Miles called. Harper updated the spreadsheet. When someone had a problem, they troubleshot together. It wasn't romantic, but it was easy, easier than Miles expected. That evening, as the light started to fade, Harper made coffee again. They sat at the picnic table in comfortable silence, the sound of the river a steady background hum. Can I ask you something? Harper said. Yeah. Why were you at the campground that night? You said you were on leave, but you could have gone anywhere. Miles turned his mug in his hands. I was tired. The fire was bad. We lost 2 structures and had a close call with a crew. I just needed to be somewhere quiet. And you picked a campground? I picked the first place I saw with an open site. He smiled faintly. Turns out it wasn't open. Harper's mouth curved. No, it wasn't. You ever regret not calling the cops? No. Harper's answer came without hesitation. You weren't a threat, just a variable I hadn't planned for. And now? Now you're a variable I'm actively choosing to include in my plans. She looked at him. That's different. Miles felt something shift in his chest. Not attraction exactly, though that was there too. Something quieter. Trust, maybe. The recognition that this person across from him operated on the same frequency he did. Systems, logic, proof over promises. For what it's worth, he said, I'm glad I picked the wrong tent. Harper held his gaze. So am I. The next week passed in a blur of preparation. Miles helped where he could, hauling equipment, coordinating with local fire crews, running last-minute errands when Harper's schedule overflowed. They fell into a rhythm that felt less like collaboration and more like partnership. But Grant was still out there, still watching, still waiting. The next move came on a Thursday, 6 days before the festival. Harper's phone rang at 7 in the morning. Miles heard her answer, heard her voice go flat, and knew before she said anything that it was bad. When she emerged from her tent, her face was pale. Grant filed a formal complaint with the county, she said. He's claiming I falsified vendor insurance documents. Miles stood. Did you? No, but 3 vendors submitted expired certificates, and I missed it in the initial review. Her hands were shaking slightly. I caught it 2 days later and had them resubmit current ones, but Grant's saying I approved vendors without valid coverage. Do you have proof you corrected it? Yes, but it doesn't matter. The county's opening an investigation, and until it's resolved, they're freezing the festival's liability coverage. Miles went cold. Which means the festival can't happen. Harper's voice cracked, just barely, not without insurance. She sat down hard on the picnic bench, her head in her hands. Miles sat beside her. He didn't touch her, just stayed close. What do you need? He asked. Harper took a shaky breath. I need the county to process the corrected documents. I need them to confirm that I followed protocol when I flagged the issue, and I need them to do it in 5 days. Can they? If they prioritize it, yes, but Grant's going to fight that. Then we make sure they don't have a choice. Harper looked at him. How? Miles thought about it, about processes and proof, and the one thing bureaucracies hated more than mistakes, public scrutiny. We go to the press, he said. We show them the timeline. We show them that you caught the error and fixed it before anyone was at risk. And we show them that Grant's using a clerical mistake to shut down an event that's already cost the city $50,000 in vendor contracts and permits. Harper's eyes widened. That's aggressive. So is what he's doing. She stared at him. Then slowly she nodded. Okay, let's do it. They spent the rest of the day building the case. Harper pulled every email, every corrected document, every timestamp. Miles drafted a statement that was calm, factual, and impossible to spin as defensive. By evening, Harper had sent the full package to the local newspaper and 2 regional outlets. The story ran the next morning. The headline read, Festival Coordinator Battles City Councilman Over Insurance Dispute. Events Future Uncertain. The article laid out the facts. Harper had caught expired certificates, corrected them within 48 hours, and documented the entire process. Grant had filed a complaint 6 weeks later, after the issue was already resolved. The county was now investigating, not the original mistake, but whether Harper had followed proper protocol in fixing it. The comment section exploded. By noon, the county administrator's office had received over 200 calls from residents demanding the investigation be expedited. By 3 p.m., the local news had picked up the story. By 5, Grant Holloway was on camera, insisting he had legitimate concerns about accountability. The next morning, the county cleared Harper. The insurance was reinstated. The festival was back. Harper stood in the middle of the meadow, staring at the email on her phone, and Miles watched the tension drain out of her shoulders all at once. "It's over," she said quietly. "For now." She looked at him. "You think he'll try again?" "I think he's running out of moves." Harper smiled. It was tired, but real. "Thank you," she said, "for all of this." Miles shrugged. "You would have figured it out." "Maybe, but I didn't have to. Because you were here." She stepped closer, close enough that Miles could see the faint shadows under her eyes, the determination that hadn't dimmed even after weeks of fighting. "I don't trust easily," Harper said, "but I trust you." Miles felt the weight of that, the deliberate choice behind it. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. Harper nodded. Then, after a moment, she held out her hand. Miles took it. They stood there in the empty meadow, the stage half built behind them, the festival site quiet except for the wind moving through the grass. And for the first time in weeks, Harper looked like she believed things might actually turn out okay. The relief lasted exactly 36 hours. Harper was at the festival site Friday morning, coordinating the stage construction crew, when her phone buzzed with a text from one of the committee members. Just 3 words: "Check your email." She pulled up her inbox and felt her stomach drop. Grant had called another emergency meeting. This time, the subject line read, "Vendor Compliance and Festival Readiness Review." Miles was helping secure the speaker towers when Harper walked over, her face tight. "He's doing it again," she said, holding up her phone. Miles climbed down from the ladder. "When?" "Monday morning, 2 days before the festival opens." Harper's voice was controlled, but he could hear the strain underneath. "He's requesting a full vendor audit, business licenses, health permits, liability certificates, everything." "You already have all that." "I do. But if even one vendor has a lapsed permit or a missing signature, he can use it to delay the opening." She looked at the stage, at the half-finished booths, at the volunteers painting directional signs. "We've got 16 vendors. If I have to track down corrected paperwork for even 2 of them over the weekend, we won't make the deadline." Miles followed her gaze. "How solid is your documentation?" "I thought it was airtight. But Grant's looking for technicalities now, not actual safety issues. He just needs 1 expired stamp, 1 mismatched date, 1 form filed in the wrong county office." "Then we check everything. Tonight, before he has a chance to request specific files." Harper turned to him. "That's 8 hours of work minimum." "Good thing we've done that before." Something flickered in Harper's expression. Gratitude maybe, or just the recognition that she wasn't doing this alone anymore. "Okay," she said, "let's go." They worked through the evening in Harper's campsite, spreading vendor files across the picnic table like evidence at a crime scene. Each folder got the same treatment: business license checked against state databases, health permits cross-referenced with county records, insurance certificates verified with actual policy numbers. Miles called vendors directly when something looked questionable, confirming details while Harper updated her master spreadsheet. By midnight, they'd found 3 problems. One vendor's health permit had expired 2 weeks earlier. Another had submitted a certificate of insurance that covered the wrong event dates. The third had a business license that was valid but filed under a slightly different company name than what appeared on their vendor application. Harper stared at the files, her jaw tight. "This is exactly what he wanted," she said quietly. "Enough to question my process. Not enough to be my fault, but enough to make it look like I'm not thorough." Miles leaned back, thinking. "Can you fix them before Monday?" "The health permit, maybe. The insurance dates, probably. It's just a clerical error and the policy's active. But the business license mismatch is going to require the vendor to refile with the county, and that office is closed until Monday morning. So you'll have 2 out of 3 fixed, which means Grant will focus on the one I can't fix and use it to argue the whole process is flawed." Harper rubbed her eyes. "He doesn't need to win. He just needs to create enough doubt that the council delays the opening for additional review." Miles watched her, saw the exhaustion pulling at her shoulders, the frustration she was too disciplined to let fully surface. "What if we don't wait for Monday?" he said. Harper looked up. "What do you mean?" "What if you send the corrected documents to the committee tonight? Show them you already identified the issues and fixed what you could. Take away his reveal. He'll just say I'm trying to cover my tracks. Let him. You'll have timestamps proving you flagged the problems before he raised them. That's not covering tracks. That's doing your job." Harper was quiet for a moment. her fingers drumming against the table. Then she opened her laptop. Okay, let's do it. She drafted an email to the full committee, attaching the corrected health permit and insurance certificate along with a summary of the business license issue and the steps she'd already taken to resolve it. Her tone was calm, factual, and made it clear she'd conducted the audit proactively, not in response to Grant's meeting request. She hit send at 12:43 a.m. Grant's reply came through at 6:15 the next morning. Harper read it out loud to Miles over coffee, her voice flat. Thank you for the update. However, given the proximity to the event date and the nature of the discrepancies identified, I believe a comprehensive review is still warranted. The meeting will proceed as scheduled. Miles took a sip of coffee. He's not even pretending anymore. No, he's committed now. If the festival succeeds, he looks petty. If it fails, he looks justified. Harper set her phone down. He's betting I'll make a mistake under pressure. Will you? Harper met his eyes. No. The meeting on Monday morning had a different energy than the last one. The room was fuller, more reporters, more residents, more people who'd read the news coverage and wanted to see how this played out. Grant sat at the head of the table with the same controlled smile, but there was something sharper in his eyes now. Desperation, maybe. Or the awareness that his window was closing. Carol Mendez called the meeting to order with a tone that suggested her patience was wearing thin. Mr. Holloway, this is the third emergency session you've called in 2 weeks. I assume you have substantive concerns that couldn't be addressed through normal channels. Grant stood, smoothing his tie. I do, Madam President. As you know, Ms. Lane submitted documentation on Saturday, indicating she'd identified compliance issues with 3 vendors. While I appreciate her diligence, the timing raises questions about the thoroughness of her original review process. Harper sat perfectly still, her binder closed in front of her. Grant clicked his remote. A slide appeared showing the 3 vendor files Harper had flagged. These issues were discovered less than a week before the festival opens. That suggests a systemic problem with how vendor vetting was conducted. I'm proposing we delay the festival opening by 1 week to allow for a complete third-party audit of all vendor documentation. The room erupted in murmurs. Carol raised a hand for silence. Ms. Lane, would you like to respond? Harper stood. She didn't open her binder. She didn't need to. Mr. Holloway is correct that I identified 3 compliance issues on Friday evening. What he didn't mention is that I identified them during a voluntary audit I conducted specifically to ensure we had no gaps before this meeting. I wasn't required to do that audit. I chose to do it because I wanted to be certain we were meeting every standard. She pulled a single sheet of paper from her folder and handed it to Carol. This is a log of every vendor file review I've conducted over the past 4 months. The first review happened in March, when vendors were initially approved. The second happened in May, when insurance certificates were updated. The third happened last Friday. Each review is documented with dates, findings, and corrective actions. Carol scanned the log. And the 3 issues Mr. Holloway mentioned? 2 are already resolved. The third, a business license filed under a variant company name, will be corrected when the county office opens this morning. The vendor has already submitted the paperwork. Grant leaned forward. But the fact remains these issues existed. The fact remains I found them and fixed them, Harper said evenly. That's not a failure of process. That's the process working exactly as designed. Designed by you. Designed by county regulations, which I've followed to the letter. Grant's smile thinned. I think an independent review would provide community reassurance. An independent review would cost $15,000 and delay an event that's already contracted, permitted, and paid for, Harper interrupted. If you want to propose that, I'd like to know who's covering the cost of breaking those contracts. The room went quiet. Grant's jaw worked. Carol tapped her pen. Mr. Holloway, do you have evidence that Ms. Lane's process violated any regulations? I have concerns. Evidence, not concerns. Grant's face flushed. I believe the community deserves transparency. The community has transparency, Carol said, her tone sharpening. Ms. Lane has provided documentation at every step of this process. She's passed inspections, corrected issues proactively, and met every deadline despite repeated obstacles. What the community doesn't deserve is a delay based on hypothetical concerns. She looked at the other council members. Unless there are objections, I'm closing this matter. The festival will proceed as scheduled. No one objected. Grant stood frozen for a moment, his carefully constructed smile finally cracking. Then, without another word, he gathered his papers and walked out. This time, he didn't come back. Harper sat down slowly, her hands flat on the table. Miles, watching from the back of the room, saw her shoulders drop just slightly. Not defeat, but the kind of exhaustion that came from holding yourself together through sheer will. When the meeting adjourned, Carol approached Harper privately. "You need to be ready," Carol said quietly. "He's not going to stop." Harper looked at her. "I know. I mean it. He's lost 3 public fights now. That makes him dangerous." Carol's expression was serious. "Men like Grant don't handle humiliation well. He's going to look for another angle. Then I'll be ready for that too." Carol studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "You've got backbone, kid. Just make sure you've got backup too." She glanced at Miles, then walked away. Harper picked up her binder and headed for the door. Miles fell into step beside her. "You okay?" he asked. "Ask me after the festival." They drove back to the site in silence. The meadow was bustling now, vendors setting up booths, volunteers stringing lights, the stage crew running sound checks. It looked like organized chaos, but Harper moved through it with the same calm efficiency she brought to everything else, answering questions and solving problems without breaking stride. Miles helped where he could, but mostly he just watched her work, watched the way people deferred to her judgment, watched the way she anticipated problems before they happened, watched the way she held everything together even when it was clear she was running on fumes. By late afternoon, the site was nearly ready. Harper stood near the main entrance, checking her tablet against the physical layout, when a vendor approached, a woman in her 40s with flour on her apron and concern on her face. "Harper, we've got a problem." Harper looked up. "What kind of problem?" "The health inspector just showed up, unannounced." Harper went very still. "The health inspector?" "Yeah, he's checking all the food vendors right now. Says he got a complaint about potential code violations." Miles saw Harper's expression shift. Not panic, but the cold, focused clarity of someone who'd just confirmed their worst suspicion. "Grant," she said quietly. The vendor blinked. "What?" "Nothing." "Where's the inspector now?" "Over by the kettle corn booth." Harper was already moving. Miles followed. The health inspector was a thin man in his 50s with a clipboard and the kind of expression that suggested he'd seen every shortcut and corner-cutting trick in the book. He was examining the hand-washing station at the kettle corn booth when Harper approached. "Inspector Morrison," Harper said, "I wasn't expecting you until Wednesday." Morrison didn't look up from his clipboard. "I received a complaint this morning about inadequate sanitation facilities. I'm required to investigate within 24 hours. What was the nature of the complaint?" "Anonymous tip suggesting that temporary food vendors might not have proper hand-washing or waste disposal access." Harper's jaw tightened, but her voice stayed calm. "All vendors were required to submit their sanitation plans as part of their approval process. I can provide those documents if you need them." "I'll need to verify they match the actual setup." "Of course." Morrison moved to the next booth, a taco truck with a gray water tank and a portable sink. He checked the water supply, tested the soap dispenser, examined the waste disposal system. Then he made a note on his clipboard. Harper watched him work, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Morrison worked his way through 6 more vendors before he stopped at a barbecue stand run by an older man named Eugene. The setup looked solid. 3-compartment sink, hand-washing station, sealed waste containers. But Morrison crouched near the gray water tank and frowned. "This tank isn't labeled," he said. Eugene looked confused. "It's gray water. There's only 1 tank." County code requires all waste tanks to have visible labeling indicating contents and disposal procedures. "I've been doing festivals for 12 years. No one's ever said anything about labeling." Morrison straightened. "The code was updated last year. All tanks need labels." Harper stepped forward. "Inspector, if this is a new requirement, can vendors be given a grace period to comply?" Morrison shook his head. "The code's been active for 14 months. That's not new." "But if vendors weren't notified, Notification is the vendor's responsibility, not mine." Morrison made another note. "This is a violation. The booth can't operate until it's corrected." Eugene's face went pale. I've got $1,000 in prep costs already invested. Then I suggest you get the tank labeled. Morrison moved to the next booth. Harper pulled out her phone and started typing rapidly. Miles moved closer. What are you doing? He asked quietly. Checking the county code update history. Her fingers flew across the screen. If this labeling requirement was added last year, there should have been a notice sent to all registered food vendors. And if there wasn't, then Morrison's citing a code that wasn't properly communicated, which means it can't be enforced retroactively. She found what she was looking for and showed Miles the screen. Here, Code Amendment 47B, adopted March of last year. Required notification period, 90 days before enforcement. Were vendors notified? Harper scrolled further. No public notice on file, no vendor mailing, no announcement at any county meeting. She looked at Morrison, who was now examining a lemonade stand. He's enforcing a rule that was never communicated. Miles watched her walk over to the inspector, her phone in hand, her expression professional but firm. Inspector Morrison, I need to show you something. Morrison glanced up, annoyed. I'm conducting an inspection. I understand, but the code you're citing, 47B regarding waste tank labeling, was amended without proper vendor notification. According to county procedure, amendments require a 90-day notice period before enforcement. That didn't happen. Morrison's expression hardened. The code is active. That's all that matters. The procedure matters too. If vendors weren't notified, you can't penalize them for non-compliance. I don't make the rules, Ms. Lane. I enforce them. Then enforce them correctly. Harper's voice stayed level, but there was steel underneath. You can note the labeling issue and require correction for future events, but you can't shut down vendors today for a code they had no reasonable way of knowing about. Morrison stared at her. Are you telling me how to do my job? I'm telling you what the county's own procedures require. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Morrison pulled out his phone, made a call, and stepped away to speak quietly to someone on the other end. Harper waited, arms crossed, her face carefully neutral. When Morrison came back, his expression was tight. I've been advised to issue warnings rather than violations for the labeling issue, he said stiffly. Vendors will have 30 days to comply. Harper nodded. Thank you. Morrison didn't respond. He finished his inspection in silence, issued written warnings to 4 vendors, and left without another word. Eugene approached Harper the moment the inspector's car disappeared down the access road. You just saved my whole setup, he said, his voice rough with relief. Thank you. Harper managed a faint smile. Just doing my job. That was more than a job. That was... Eugene shook his head. Just thank you. He walked back to his booth, and Harper stood there for a moment, staring at the empty road. Miles stepped beside her. That was close. That was intentional. Harper's voice was quiet, but there was anger simmering underneath. Grant called in that complaint. He knew about the labeling code because he's on the County Health Advisory Board. He set this up. Can you prove it? No, the complaint was anonymous. She turned to face him. But it doesn't matter. He's escalating. First the inspection date, then the insurance freeze, now this. He's throwing everything he can at me, hoping something sticks. And if nothing does? Harper's expression went cold. Then he'll try something else. She was right. The next attack came the following day, less than 24 hours before the festival opened. Harper was doing a final walkthrough with the volunteer coordinators when her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. She answered anyway. This is Harper Lane. Ms. Lane, this is Andrea Chen from the county treasurer's office. I'm calling about the festival's event permit. Harper's stomach tightened. What about it? We've received notification that the permit fee was paid with a check that bounced. The permit's been revoked pending payment correction. Harper stopped walking. That's not possible. I paid with a cashier's check. Our records show a personal check, account number ending in 4739. That's not my account. Harper's mind raced. I submitted payment on April 2nd. Cashier's check, receipt number 88634. I have the documentation. There was a pause on the other end. Let me pull the file. Harper waited, her pulse hammering. Miles saw her face and walked over. What's wrong? He asked quietly. Harper held up a hand. On the phone, Andrea came back on the line. Ms. Lane, I'm looking at the file now. The payment on record is a personal check dated April 8th, 6 days after you said you submitted the cashier's check. Then someone changed the payment record. Harper's voice was tight. Pull the original transaction log. There should be 2 entries, one from April 2nd and one from April 8th. Another pause. Longer this time. You're right, Andrea said slowly. There are 2 entries. The first shows a cashier's check for $1,500, marked as received and processed. The second shows a personal check for the same amount, marked as a replacement payment requested by the permit holder. I never requested a replacement. The request came through the county clerk's office on April 7th. It's signed by... Andrea trailed off. It's signed by Grant Holloway as committee chair. Harper closed her eyes. He falsified a payment change. It appears that way. Can you reverse it? I can flag it for investigation, but that takes time. And until it's resolved, the permit status is technically in limbo, which means the festival can't open tomorrow. Andrea's voice softened. I'm sorry, Ms. Lane. My hands are tied until the county attorney reviews this. Harper thanked her and ended the call. She stood there for a moment, staring at nothing, her hands shaking. Miles waited. He forged a payment change to invalidate the permit, Harper said finally, her voice hollow. The festival's supposed to open in 16 hours, and we don't have legal authorization to operate. Can you fight it? Not in 16 hours. The county attorney won't even see the case until Monday. She looked at the meadow, the finished stage, the vendor booths, the lights strung between posts, thousands of dollars in contracts, weeks of work. It's over. Miles didn't accept that. Call Carol. She can't override the county treasurer. She can apply pressure, make noise, force them to expedite the review. It won't be enough. Then we go public again. Show them the forged request. Show them Grant's signature. Make it so ugly they have to act fast. Harper looked at him, something desperate flickering in her expression. You really think that'll work? I think it's the only move we have left. Harper pulled out her phone and called Carol. The conversation was brief, tense, and ended with Carol promising to call the county attorney directly. Then Harper called the newspaper, then the local TV station, then every contact she had who might be able to apply pressure. By evening, the story was everywhere. City councilman accused of forging document to sabotage festival. The county attorney's office issued a statement promising an immediate investigation. Grant released a response claiming the payment change was a legitimate correction based on committee authority. The comment sections exploded again, this time with outrage that was louder and sharper than before. At 8 p.m., Carol called Harper back. The county attorney agreed to an emergency review, Carol said. They're meeting tonight. You'll have an answer by midnight. Harper let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Carol hung up. Miles sat beside Harper on the picnic bench, both of them staring at her phone like it might explode. You should eat something, Miles said. I can't. When's the last time you ate? Harper thought about it. Yesterday, maybe. Miles stood. I'm making you food. I'm not hungry. I don't care. He pulled out his camp stove and started heating water for instant ramen. Harper watched him, too tired to argue. When he handed her the bowl, she took it automatically and ate without tasting anything. At 11:47, her phone rang. Harper answered on the second ring. This is Harper. Miss Lane, this is County Attorney David Park. I've completed the review of your permit situation. Harper put the phone on speaker so Miles could hear. The payment change request signed by Mr. Holloway was submitted without proper authorization, Park continued. Committee chairs don't have unilateral authority to modify financial transactions. The original cashier's check payment stands. Your permit is valid. Harper's eyes closed. Thank you. We're also opening a formal investigation into Mr. Holloway's actions. If he falsified the request, there will be consequences. I appreciate that. The festival can proceed as scheduled. I'm sorry for the confusion. Park hung up. Harper set her phone down carefully, like it might shatter. Then she put her head in her hands and started to cry. Not loud, not dramatic. Just quiet, exhausted tears that came from weeks of fighting and finally being allowed to stop. Miles didn't say anything. He just moved closer, his presence steady and solid beside her. After a few minutes, Harper wiped her eyes and looked at him. "I'm okay," she said. "I know. I just needed a minute." "Take as many as you need." Harper smiled faintly. Then she stood, squared her shoulders, and picked up her phone again. "I need to notify the vendors," she said. "Let them know we're still on. I'll help." They spent the next hour making calls, sending texts, updating the website. By 1 a.m., every vendor had been notified. By 2, Harper finally let herself believe it was real. The festival was happening. And Grant Holloway had just run out of moves. The morning of the festival opening, Harper was at the site before sunrise. Miles found her standing near the main stage, coffee in hand, staring at the empty meadow like she was trying to memorize it before everything changed. The sky was just starting to lighten, turning the eastern horizon pale gold, and the air still held the cool bite of night. "Couldn't sleep?" Miles asked, walking up beside her. "Didn't try." Harper took a sip of coffee. "Figured if I was going to be awake anyway, I might as well be useful." "You've been useful for 4 months straight. You're allowed to rest." Harper's mouth curved slightly. "I'll rest when this is over." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the light spread across the meadow. The stage looked solid in the early morning, professional, ready. Vendor booths lined the pathways in neat rows. Strings of lights waited to be turned on. Everything Harper had fought for, built, and defended was right here, about to become real. "You nervous?" Miles asked. "Terrified," Harper said without hesitation. "I keep waiting for something else to go wrong." "Nothing's going to go wrong. You don't know that. I know you've checked everything 3 times. I know every vendor's confirmed, every volunteer's briefed, every safety measure's in place." Miles looked at her. "And I know that if something does go wrong, you'll handle it." Harper met his gaze, and something in her expression softened. "You have a lot of faith in me. You've earned it." Before Harper could respond, headlights swept across the access road. The first vendor truck was arriving. Harper straightened, set her coffee down, and shifted into coordinator mode. Shoulders back, expression focused, ready to solve whatever came next. The morning unfolded in controlled chaos. Vendors arrived in waves, unloading equipment and setting up their booths with the kind of efficient hurry that came from experience. Harper moved between them, checking setups, answering questions, troubleshooting problems before they escalated. Miles worked crowd control at the entrance, directing vehicles and keeping the access road clear. By 9 a.m., the meadow was transformed. Food trucks lined the western edge, their awnings open and grills heating. Craft vendors displayed handmade jewelry, pottery, and art along the central pathway. The stage crew ran final sound checks, and the opening band started arriving with instrument cases and nervous energy. At 9:30, the gates opened. The first wave of attendees came through in a steady stream, families with kids, couples, groups of friends. Harper watched from near the information booth, her clipboard in hand, monitoring the flow. Everything was running smoothly, too smoothly maybe. She kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. It didn't. By noon, the festival was in full swing. The meadow was packed with people, the air filled with music and laughter and the smell of grilled food. Harper did another walkthrough, checking waste stations, confirming vendor supplies, making sure the first aid tent was staffed. Everything was exactly as it should be. Miles found her near the kettle corn booth, talking to Eugene about propane tank levels. "You need to eat," Miles said when Eugene walked away. Harper shook her head. "I'm fine. You haven't eaten since last night." "I had coffee." "That's not food." Harper gave him a look. "I'll eat when things slow down." "Things aren't going to slow down. You're just going to run yourself into the ground." Miles pulled a wrapped sandwich from his pocket. "Eat this. It's from the Italian vendor. I already paid for it." Harper stared at the sandwich, then at him. "You're bossy." "I'm practical. Eat." She took the sandwich, unwrapped it, and ate while walking to the next checkpoint. Miles stayed beside her, and they fell into the same rhythm they'd developed over the past few weeks. Harper making decisions, Miles executing them, both of them moving through problems with the kind of wordless efficiency that came from trust. At 2 p.m., Harper's radio crackled. "Harper, this is Jenna at the main gate. We've got a situation." Harper keyed the radio. "What kind of situation?" "There's a man here demanding to speak with you. Says he's from the city council. Security won't let him through without your approval." Harper's jaw tightened. She didn't need to ask who it was. "I'll be right there." She started toward the entrance, and Miles followed without asking. When they reached the gate, Grant Holloway was standing outside the security checkpoint, his face tight with controlled anger. A security volunteer, a college kid named Marcus, stood between Grant and the entrance, looking deeply uncomfortable. Harper approached, her expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Holloway?" Grant turned to her, his smile sharp. "Ms. Lane, I was just trying to enter the festival, but your security team seems to think I need special permission." "All attendees need tickets," Harper said evenly. "Council members aren't exempt." "I'm not here as an attendee. I'm here on official business." "What kind of business?" Grant's smile thinned. "I'm conducting a site visit to ensure the festival's operating within approved parameters." Harper met his gaze. "The county inspector already verified compliance yesterday. You were copied on the report." "I'm aware. But as committee chair, I have the authority to conduct my own review." "Actually, you don't." Harper kept her voice calm, professional. "The committee's oversight role ended when the permit was issued. You have no legal authority to inspect an active event unless there's a documented safety violation." Grant's expression hardened. "Are you refusing me entry?" "I'm informing you of the rules. If you'd like to attend as a guest, you're welcome to purchase a ticket like everyone else. This is a publicly funded event. This is a permitted private event on county land. Public funding doesn't grant you automatic access." For a long moment, Grant just stared at her. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call, stepping away to speak in a low, tense voice. Marcus looked at Harper nervously. "Did I do the right thing?" "You did exactly the right thing," Harper said. "Don't let anyone through without a ticket or my direct approval. That includes council members." "Yes, ma'am." Grant finished his call and walked back over. His smile was gone now, replaced by something colder. "I've just spoken with Carol Mendez," he said. "She's confirmed that as committee chair, I have the right to observe festival operations." Harper didn't blink. "Then Carol can provide that authorization in writing. Until then, you're not entering without a ticket." Grant's jaw worked. "You're making a mistake. I'm following procedure, something you've insisted on for the past 2 months." The silence that followed was heavy. People in line behind Grant were starting to notice the confrontation, pulling out phones, recording. Grant seemed to realize it too. His expression shifted, the anger smoothing into something more controlled. "Fine," he said quietly. "I'll purchase a ticket." He pulled out his wallet, paid the entrance fee with deliberate slowness, and accepted the wristband Marcus handed him. Then he walked through the gate without another word. Harper watched him disappear into the crowd, her stomach tight. Miles stepped beside her. "He's going to look for problems." "I know. You want me to keep an eye on him?" Harper thought about it, then shook her head. "No. If we follow him, it looks like we're worried. Let him look. He won't find anything." Miles studied her face. "You sure about that?" "No," Harper said honestly, "but I have to act like I am." She turned and walked back toward the main festival area, her radio already crackling with the next question that needed answering. For the next 3 hours, Harper worked with one eye on her tasks and one eye on Grant. She spotted him occasionally, talking to vendors, examining waste stations, taking photos on his phone. He moved through the festival like an inspector, and people noticed. Harper saw the way vendors tensed when he approached, the way volunteers double-checked their stations after he passed. At 5 p.m., the main stage act started, a local band that drew a crowd of about 300 people. Harper stood near the sound booth, monitoring crowd density and making sure the barriers were holding. The music was loud, energetic, and the audience was into it. That's when Grant made his move. Harper saw him near the edge of the crowd, talking to someone in an official-looking jacket. She couldn't hear the conversation over the music, but she saw Grant gesture toward the stage, saw the other person pull out a tablet and start typing. Harper's radio crackled. "Harper, this is Dave at the fire safety station. I just got approached by someone from the county fire marshal's office. They're saying we need to reduce crowd capacity near the stage." Harper keyed the radio. "Did they provide documentation?" "They said it's based on a field assessment, something about exit route access being partially blocked." Harper looked toward the stage. The crowd was dense but not dangerous. The exit routes were clearly marked and accessible. She'd verified them herself that morning. "I'm on my way," she said. She found the fire marshal's representative, a young woman named Lisa Chen, standing near the stage with Grant beside her, both of them looking at the crowd. Ms. Chen, Harper said, approaching, I understand there's a concern about crowd capacity. Lisa turned. Ms. Lane, yes. I've been observing the crowd flow, and I'm concerned that the density near the stage might impede emergency egress. The current crowd size is well within our permitted capacity. We're approved for 500 in this area. I'm estimating about 300 right now. It's not just the numbers. It's the distribution. Lisa gestured toward a section near the front where people were standing close together. If there was an emergency, people in that section would have difficulty reaching the exits. Harper looked at the crowd, then at the exits. Lisa wasn't wrong that the section was dense, but it wasn't blocking anything. People could move. The aisles were clear. The exits are accessible, Harper said carefully, and we have security stationed at each one to manage flow if needed. Grant spoke up. Ms. Chen, in your professional opinion, does this crowd configuration meet safety standards? Lisa hesitated. It's borderline. Borderline meaning it could be a violation? Meaning it's a judgment call. Grant smiled slightly. And if something were to happen, if someone got injured because they couldn't evacuate quickly enough, who would be liable? Lisa's expression tightened. That would depend on the circumstances. But the event coordinator would bear some responsibility. Harper saw where this was going. Grant wasn't trying to shut down the festival anymore. He was trying to create a paper trail, documentation that Harper had been warned about a safety issue and chose to ignore it. Ms. Chen, Harper said, keeping her voice level, what specific action are you recommending? Lisa looked uncomfortable. I'd recommend reducing the crowd size in this area by about 20%, or widening the exit aisles. The exit aisles are already at code width. I can ask people to spread out more, but I can't force them to leave. You could temporarily close entry to this area until the density reduces naturally. Harper considered that. It was reasonable. It wouldn't shut anything down, just slow the flow. But it would also give Grant exactly what he wanted, proof that there'd been a safety concern. Okay, Harper said. I'll have security pause entry to this section until the crowd thins. Will that address your concern? Lisa nodded. Yes, that should work. Harper radioed her security team and gave the instruction. Within minutes, volunteers were redirecting new arrivals to other areas of the festival. The crowd near the stage stayed dense but stopped growing. Lisa made notes on her tablet, thanked Harper, and walked away. Grant stayed. That was a close call, he said, his tone almost pleasant. Harper didn't respond. You're doing a good job managing this, Grant continued, but these kinds of issues, they add up. One misjudgment, one overlooked detail, and suddenly you've got a real problem. Harper turned to face him. Is there something specific you need, Mr. Holloway? Just making an observation. Your observations are noted. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. She started to walk away, but Grant's next words stopped her. You know this isn't over, right? Harper turned back slowly. What isn't over? Grant's smile was thin, cold. You won this round. The festival's happening, the permit's valid, and I look like the bad guy. Congratulations. But the council still has oversight authority. The budget still has to be reviewed. And if there are any issues today, any complaints, any incidents, any financial discrepancies, that review is going to be very thorough. There won't be any issues. You sound confident. I am. Grant studied her for a long moment. You're tougher than I expected. I'll give you that. But tough doesn't mean invincible. And powerful doesn't mean right. Something flickered in Grant's expression. Not anger, but something colder. Recognition, maybe. Or respect for an opponent who wouldn't back down. Enjoy your festival, Ms. Lane, he said quietly. Then he turned and walked away. Harper stood there, watching him disappear into the crowd, her hands clenched at her sides. Miles appeared beside her. What did he say? He said this isn't over. Is he right? Harper looked at the festival, the music, the people, the lights starting to glow as evening approached. Everything she'd fought for was happening, right now, exactly as planned. I don't know, she said quietly, but I'm done caring what he thinks. Miles nodded. Good. The rest of the evening passed without incident. The band finished their set to enthusiastic applause. The food vendors sold out of their most popular items. Families wandered between booths, kids ran around with glow sticks, and the atmosphere was exactly what Harper had envisioned: relaxed, joyful, community-focused. By 9 p.m., the crowd started to thin. By 10, the vendors were packing up. By 11, the meadow was nearly empty except for volunteers breaking down equipment and hauling trash to the collection point. Harper did a final walkthrough with her team, checking that everything was secured and nothing was left behind. Miles walked with her, helping carry bins and fold tables. When the last volunteer left, Harper stood in the middle of the empty meadow and just breathed. "You did it," Miles said. Harper looked around at the torn-up grass, the scuff marks from thousands of feet, the lingering smell of fried food and summer heat. Tomorrow, they'd have to clean all of this up. Tomorrow, there'd be budget reports and vendor evaluations, and probably another meeting with Grant trying to find something to criticize. But tonight, it was done. "Yeah," Harper said softly. "I did." Miles stepped closer. "How does it feel?" Harper thought about that. About the weeks of fighting, the sleepless nights, the constant pressure of knowing one mistake could unravel everything. About standing in front of Grant Holloway and refusing to break. "It feels like I can finally stop holding my breath," she said. Miles smiled. "Then breathe." Harper did, deep and slow, letting the tension drain out of her shoulders for the first time in weeks. Then her radio crackled one last time. "Harper, this is Carol. You there?" Harper keyed the radio, surprised. "I'm here. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I just wanted to let you know. The county attorney's investigation concluded. Grant Holloway submitted his resignation from the council about an hour ago." Harper went very still. "He resigned?" "Effective immediately. Apparently the evidence of the forged payment request was pretty damning. They gave him the choice to resign or face formal charges." Carol's voice held a note of satisfaction. "He chose resignation." Harper didn't know what to say. She'd expected more fighting, more appeals, more attempts to undermine her even after the festival ended. She hadn't expected him to just quit. "Thank you for letting me know," Harper said finally. "You earned this, kid. Enjoy it." Carol paused. "And Harper? The council's already talking about making you the permanent festival coordinator, if you want it." Harper's breath caught. "I'll think about it." "You do that. Good work today." The radio went silent. Harper lowered it slowly, staring at nothing. Miles waited. "He's gone," Harper said quietly. "Grant resigned." "How do you feel about that?" Harper thought about it. She expected to feel triumphant, vindicated, something big and satisfying. Instead, she just felt tired. "I feel like I can finally move forward," she said, without looking over my shoulder. Miles nodded. "That's a good feeling." They walked back to the parking area in silence. Harper's truck was one of the last vehicles left, sitting under a streetlight that flickered slightly. She unlocked it but didn't get in. "Thank you," she said, turning to Miles. "For all of this. I couldn't have done it without you." Miles leaned against the truck. "You would have figured it out." "Maybe, but it would have been a lot harder." Harper met his eyes. "Why did you stay? You could have left after that first day. You didn't owe me anything." Miles was quiet for a moment, considering. "You made me coffee when you could have called the cops. You gave me a chance when you didn't have to. And when I saw what you were up against," he shrugged, "I wanted to see you win." Harper's expression softened. "I'm glad you stayed." "Me too." They stood there in the parking lot, the night air cool and quiet around them, and Harper realized she didn't want to leave, didn't want to go back to her empty campsite and process everything alone. "You want to get actual food?" she asked. "Not festival food, real food." Miles smiled. "Yeah, I'd like that." They drove to a diner on the edge of town that was still open, slid into a corner booth, and ordered breakfast even though it was nearly midnight. The coffee was terrible, and the hash browns were greasy and perfect, and Harper ate without thinking about permits or inspections or anything except how good it felt to just be hungry and tired and done. "What are you going to do next?" Miles asked, pushing his empty plate aside. Harper wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. "I don't know. Probably take a few days off, sleep, maybe go somewhere without a clipboard." "And after that?" I'll probably take the coordinator position if they offer it officially. It's good work. Challenging. She looked at him. What about you? Back to the firehouse? Yeah. I'm off rotation for another week, but then I'm back on. Miles hesitated. The station's about 40 minutes from here. Harper caught the subtext. That's not that far. No, it's not. They looked at each other across the table, and something shifted. Not dramatic, just a quiet acknowledgement that this thing between them wasn't ending with the festival. I'd like to see you again, Miles said, if you're interested. Harper's mouth curved. I'm interested. Good. They finished their coffee, paid the check, and walked back out into the parking lot. Miles walked Harper to her truck, and they stood there for a moment in the space between saying goodnight and not wanting to. I'll call you tomorrow, Miles said. Okay. He stepped closer, and Harper met him halfway. The kiss was slow, careful, like they were both testing something new and wanted to get it right. When they pulled apart, Harper was smiling. That was nice, she said. Yeah, it was. Miles watched her drive away, then got in his own truck and sat there for a minute, processing. He'd come to this campground exhausted and looking for quiet. Instead, he'd found someone who fought like hell and made coffee like it was an act of faith. He wasn't sure what happened next, but he was pretty sure he wanted to find out. Harper drove back to the campground with the windows down, letting the night air clear her head. When she reached her site, she didn't set up her tent. She just sat at the picnic table, looked up at the stars, and let herself feel it. The relief, the exhaustion, the quiet pride of knowing she'd built something good and defended it when it mattered. Her phone buzzed, a text from Miles. Made it home. Sleep well. Harper smiled and typed back. You too. And Miles, thank you for everything. The response came a minute later. Anytime. Harper set her phone down and closed her eyes, listening to the river move over stones in the darkness. For the first time in months, she let herself believe that things were going to be okay. Not perfect, not easy, but okay. And that was enough. The morning after the festival, Harper woke to sunlight filtering through her tent and the sound of her phone buzzing insistently. She reached for it, squinting at the screen. 7 missed calls, 12 texts, all from the same number, Carol Mendez. Harper sat up, her heart rate picking up, and called back. Carol answered on the first ring. Finally, where have you been? Sleeping. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. The opposite, actually. Carol's voice held an energy Harper wasn't used to hearing. The festival numbers just came in. Harper, you brought in $42,000 in revenue. That's triple what we projected. Harper blinked, trying to process that. Triple? Ticket sales, vendor fees, sponsorships, all of it. The treasurer's office is thrilled. The mayor's thrilled. The entire council wants to meet with you this afternoon. About what? About making this an annual event, and about offering you the permanent coordinator position with a real budget and staff. Carol paused. Harper, you just proved that this town can pull off something major. They want you to do it again. Harper sat there in her tent, phone pressed to her ear, feeling the weight of that settle over her. She'd spent the last 4 months fighting just to make one festival happen. The idea of doing it again, bigger, better, with actual support, felt surreal. When's the meeting? Harper asked. 3 o'clock, City Hall. Dress nice. I'll be there. Harper ended the call and sat in the quiet of her tent for a long moment. Then she got up, packed her things with the same methodical precision she brought to everything else, and drove to the festival site for cleanup. The meadow looked worse in daylight. Trash bins overflowed. Vendor booths sat half collapsed. The grass was trampled into mud in places, and there were scuff marks on the stage that would need sanding. But underneath the mess, Harper could see what they'd built. The infrastructure was solid. The layout worked. The foundation was there to do this again. She spent the morning coordinating the cleanup crew, volunteers, and a few vendors who'd stayed to help. They broke down booths, hauled equipment, and filled industrial trash bags until the meadow started to look like itself again. Miles showed up around 10 with coffee and work gloves, and they fell into the same rhythm they'd developed over the past weeks, Harper directing, Miles executing, both of them moving through tasks without needing to discuss every detail. By noon, the site was clear. Harper stood near the stage, looking at the empty meadow, and felt something shift in her chest. Not relief, exactly. More like closure, The thing she'd built was done, and it had worked. Miles walked over, wiping dirt from his hands. You good? Yeah, I have a meeting at City Hall in a few hours. They want to talk about making this permanent. You gonna take it? Harper thought about that, about the exhaustion and the fighting and the endless documentation, about Grant's resignation and the way the council had finally started listening, about the look on Eugene's face when she'd saved his booth from being shut down. Probably, she said, if they actually give me the resources to do it right. They'd be stupid not to. Harper smiled faintly. We'll see. They drove back to the campground together, and Harper showered in the bathhouse, changed into the one professional outfit she'd packed, and tried to make herself look like someone who should be running a major municipal event. When she checked her reflection, she looked tired but competent. It would have to be enough. Miles was waiting outside when she emerged. You look good, he said. I look like I haven't slept in a week. You look like someone who just pulled off something impossible. Harper met his eyes. I couldn't have done it without you. You could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to. She kissed him then, quick and simple, in the parking lot of the bathhouse. When she pulled back, Miles was smiling. Go impress them, he said. I'll try. Harper drove to City Hall with her nerves humming. She'd fought the council for months, and now they wanted to celebrate her success. It felt like whiplash, like she'd spent so long bracing for the next attack that she didn't know how to stand down. The meeting room was the same one where she'd faced Grant multiple times, but the energy was completely different. Carol sat at the head of the table, flanked by 4 other council members Harper recognized. The mayor, a man in his 60s named Robert Chen, sat to Carol's right, looking pleased. Miss Lane, Mayor Chen said as Harper entered. Thank you for coming. Please sit. Harper sat, her hands folded on the table, her expression professional. I'll get straight to the point, the mayor continued. Yesterday's festival exceeded every expectation we had. The revenue, the attendance, the community response, all of it was outstanding. We want to make this an annual event, and we want you to lead it. Harper nodded slowly. I appreciate that, but I need to know what that would actually look like. Resources, timeline, authority. Carol slid a folder across the table. We've put together a preliminary proposal. Full-time coordinator position, salary of $65,000 with benefits, administrative assistant, dedicated budget of $80,000 for the first year with potential increases based on performance. Harper opened the folder, scanned the documents. It was more than she'd expected, significantly more. What about oversight? She asked. You'd report directly to the city manager with quarterly updates to the council, Mayor Chen said. But day-to-day operations would be your authority. No more committee approval for every decision. And if there are disputes? Carol leaned forward. We're also implementing new protocol. Any concerns about festival operations have to be raised in writing with specific evidence, not vague complaints. No more last-minute inspection changes. No more buried deadlines. We learned from what happened with Grant. Harper looked at the faces around the table. They were sincere, she thought. They'd seen what Grant had done, and they were trying to correct it. I want creative control, Harper said. Theme, vendors, layout, those decisions need to be mine. Agreed, the mayor said, and I want the authority to hire my own security and safety coordinators, people I trust. Also agreed. Harper looked down at the proposal again. It was a good offer, more than good. It was the kind of opportunity that didn't come around often, the chance to build something from the ground up with actual support behind it. Can I have some time to think about it? Harper asked. The mayor smiled. Of course. Take a few days, but Harper, we really hope you'll say yes. Harper left the meeting with the folder under her arm and a lot to consider. She drove back to the campground, changed into comfortable clothes, and sat at her picnic table staring at the proposal until the words started to blur. Miles found her there an hour later. How'd it go? He asked. They offered me the job. Full-time, real budget, actual authority. That's great. It is, Harper said. But I keep waiting for the catch. Miles sat across from her. What if there isn't one? There's always one. Not always. Sometimes people just recognize good work and want more of it. Harper looked at him. You really believe that? I believe you earned this. And I believe they know it. Harper was quiet for a moment. Then she said, If I take this, it's going to be intense. Long hours, high pressure, especially in the lead up to next year's festival. I know. And you're going back to the firehouse. You'll be on rotation, probably out of town half the time. Probably. So we'd be two people with demanding jobs trying to figure out how to make something work. Miles nodded slowly. Yeah, we would be. Harper met his eyes. Does that scare you? A little, Miles admitted, but not enough to make me walk away. Harper felt something ease in her chest. Not fear exactly, more like the recognition that this thing between them was real enough to be complicated, and that neither of them was running from that. Okay, she said quietly. I'm going to take the job. Miles smiled. Good. That evening, Harper called Carol and accepted the position. The paperwork would take a few weeks to process, but the job was hers. For the first time in months, Harper let herself think about the future without it being a fight to survive. She could plan, she could build, she could create something that lasted. The next few days passed in a strange kind of limbo. Harper stayed at the campground, tying up loose ends from the festival, final vendor payments, volunteer thank you emails, budget reconciliation. Miles helped when he could, but his leave was ending and he had to report back to his station. They spent his last evening together by the river, coffee between them like it had been that first morning. The water moved slow and steady, reflecting the fading light. When do you think you'll be back this way? Harper asked. Miles considered. Rotation's 3 weeks on, 1 week off, so probably 3 weeks. That's a long time. It is, but I'll call. You better. Miles reached across the space between them and took her hand. This isn't ending, Harper. Distance doesn't change that. Harper squeezed his hand. I know, but I'm allowed to miss you anyway. Yeah, you are. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the light fade and the stars start to emerge. Harper thought about the past few weeks, the way this man had walked into her life by accident and stayed by choice, the way he'd stood beside her when he didn't have to, the way he made coffee and asked questions and never once made her feel like she was too much or not enough. Thank you, Harper said quietly. For what? For making me coffee that first morning. For staying. For all of it. Miles looked at her, his expression soft. Best wrong 10 I ever climbed into. Harper laughed, and the sound felt good, easy and genuine. Yeah, she said. Mine too. Miles left the next morning. Harper walked him to his truck, and they kissed goodbye with the promise of phone calls and visits and figuring things out as they went. Then he drove away, and Harper stood in the parking lot feeling the absence but not the emptiness. She had work to do. Over the next 2 weeks, Harper transitioned into her new role. The city set her up with an office, small, but hers. She hired an administrative assistant named Petra, who was organized, efficient, and didn't mind Harper's relentless attention to detail. She started building vendor relationships for the next festival, reaching out to artisans and food trucks and performers who'd heard about this year's success and wanted in. The work was still intense, but it was different now. She had support. She had resources. She had the authority to make decisions without constantly looking over her shoulder. And she had something else too, something she hadn't expected when she'd woken up in her tent that first morning to find a firefighter who'd accidentally invaded her space. She had hope, real, tangible hope that things could work out if you fought for them hard enough. 3 weeks after Miles left, Harper was in her office reviewing sponsorship proposals when her phone rang. Miles's name lit up the screen. Hey, Harper said, smiling before she even answered. You back? I'm back, and I'm exhausted, but I'm also 20 minutes from your office if you want to grab dinner. Harper looked at the pile of paperwork on her desk, then at the clock. It was 6:30. She'd been working since 7 that morning. I'll meet you at the diner, she said. The one with the terrible coffee? That's the one. She heard him laugh. See you in 20. Harper grabbed her jacket, locked her office, and drove to the diner with something light and warm spreading through her chest. When she walked in, Miles was already in their corner booth, and the sight of him, tired but smiling, still in his work shirt, made her realize just how much she'd missed him. She slid into the seat across from him. You look terrible. Thanks. You look beautiful. Harper rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. How was rotation? Long? Hot? We had 2 major fires and about a dozen small ones, but everyone made it home safe. That's what matters. Miles reached across the table and took her hand. Tell me about the festival planning. How's it going? Harper launched into an update. Vendors she'd signed, sponsors she'd secured, ideas she had for next year's theme. Miles listened with the same focused attention he brought to everything, asking questions and offering suggestions like her success mattered to him as much as it did to her. They ordered food and talked until the diner started closing, then walked out into the parking lot and stood by Harper's truck, reluctant to say goodnight. I have something for you, Miles said suddenly. He walked to his own truck, opened the glove box, and came back with a small box. He handed it to Harper. She opened it carefully. Inside was a key on a simple key ring. Harper looked up at him, confused. What's this? It's a key to my apartment, Miles said. I know we've only known each other a few weeks, and I'm gone half the time. But when I'm back, I want you to have access. No asking permission, no checking if it's okay, just shared space. Harper stared at the key, feeling the weight of what he was offering. Not romance in the traditional sense. Not grand gestures or declarations, just practical, tangible trust. The kind that said, I'm choosing you, and I want you to choose me back. Miles, Harper said softly, It's logical, Miles interrupted. You're here. I'm here when I can be. Having a key makes sense. Harper smiled because that was so perfectly them, turning vulnerability into logistics. It makes a lot of sense, she agreed. She took the key, slipped it onto her own keyring, and kissed him. When they pulled apart, Miles was smiling too. You hungry for breakfast? He asked. It's almost 10 p.m. I meant tomorrow. I'm off shift for a week. Thought maybe we could do the normal couple thing. Breakfast, errands, boring stuff. Harper's chest felt warm. I'd like that. Good. Pick you up at 8? I'll be ready. They said goodnight, and Harper drove back to her apartment, the small one-bedroom she'd rented after accepting the coordinator position, with the key Miles had given her sitting on the passenger seat like a promise. The next morning, Miles picked her up exactly at 8. They went to a local cafe, ordered pancakes and actual good coffee, and sat across from each other reading the newspaper like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. There's an article about the festival, Miles said, pointing to a section in the local news. Harper leaned over to read it. The headline said, Summer Solstice Festival deemed major success. City plans to expand event next year. The article quoted Mayor Chen praising Harper's coordination, mentioned the revenue numbers, and included a photo from opening night showing the crowd near the main stage. It was positive, glowing even, and Harper felt a quiet pride reading it. You're famous, Miles said. I'm competent. There's a difference. You're both. Harper set the paper down. You know what's weird? I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for someone to challenge this or find a problem or tell me I'm not doing it right, and it's just not happening. That's called success, Harper. You're allowed to enjoy it. I know. It just feels strange. Miles reached across the table and took her hand. Get used to it. You earned this. Over the next few months, they settled into a rhythm. Miles worked his rotation, 3 weeks on, 1 week off. When he was gone, Harper focused on festival planning, building systems, and vendor relationships and community partnerships that would make next year even better. When he was back, they did the small, ordinary things that made a relationship real. Grocery shopping, cooking dinner, watching bad movies, falling asleep on his couch after long days. It wasn't perfect. They had arguments about whose schedule took priority, about how to balance work and time together, about Miles's tendency to downplay injuries and Harper's inability to stop working even when she was exhausted. But they worked through it the same way they'd worked through Grant's attacks, with honesty, communication, and the understanding that problems were just variables to be solved. 6 months after the first festival, Harper was invited to speak at a county coordinators conference about successful municipal events. She stood in front of a room of people who did what she did and talked about documentation, vendor management, and crisis response. She talked about building systems that could withstand scrutiny, and she talked about the importance of having people you could trust when things got hard. After the presentation, a woman approached her, late 30s, professional, with the look of someone who'd fought similar battles. That was impressive, the woman said, especially the part about handling political interference. Harper nodded. It's unfortunately common. It is, but most people don't survive it the way you did. You didn't just survive, you won. The woman extended her hand. I'm Rachel Ortiz. I coordinate events for the state park system. I'd love to talk to you about consulting on a project we're developing. Harper shook her hand, surprised. Consulting? We're launching a series of regional festivals next year. We need someone who understands compliance, logistics, and how to deal with bureaucratic obstacles. Your name keeps coming up. Harper felt something spark in her chest. Not just pride, but possibility. The idea that what she'd built could expand beyond one town, one festival. That she could help other people navigate the same challenges she'd faced. I'd be interested in hearing more, Harper said. Rachel smiled. Good. Let's set up a call. They exchanged information, and Harper walked out of the conference feeling like her world had just gotten bigger. That evening, she called Miles from her hotel room. How'd it go? He asked. Good. Really good, actually. I might have a consulting opportunity. That's amazing. Tell me about it. Harper explained the conversation with Rachel, the potential project, the idea of expanding her work beyond the local festival. Miles listened, asked questions, and when she finished, he said exactly what she needed to hear. You should do it. It would mean more work, more travel probably. It would also mean more impact, more people getting the benefit of what you know. Miles paused. Harper, you're good at this. You should let more people see that. Harper smiled, feeling the support in his words. What about us? We'll figure it out, same way we've been figuring it out. You're sure? I'm sure. Harper leaned back against the hotel headboard, phone pressed to her ear, and felt the future open up in front of her. Not perfect, not without challenges, but full of possibility. I love you, she said. The words came out simply, without build-up, because they were just true. There was a pause on the other end. Then Miles said, I love you too. Harper felt her chest go warm. This is real, isn't it? Yeah, it is. Okay, good. She heard him laugh softly. Get some sleep. We'll celebrate when you get back. Looking forward to it. Harper hung up and sat in the quiet hotel room, processing everything that had happened in the past 6 months. She'd gone from fighting just to make one festival happen to being offered opportunities she hadn't even known existed. She'd gone from working alone to having a partner who showed up when it mattered. She'd built something, and it was still growing. The next year's Summer Solstice Festival was even bigger than the first. Harper coordinated with a team of 5, secured major sponsors, and brought in regional performers that drew crowds from 3 counties over. The meadow was packed, the vendors were happy, and the revenue topped $90,000. Mayor Chen gave a speech at the opening ceremony, thanking Harper publicly for her leadership and vision. The crowd applauded, and Harper stood near the stage feeling the weight of that recognition, not just for surviving, but for succeeding. Miles was there, off rotation for the weekend, helping manage crowd flow near the entrance. When the ceremony ended, Harper found him by the security checkpoint. You did it again, he said. We did it again, Harper corrected. Miles smiled. Fair enough. They walked through the festival together, checking vendors and watching people enjoy what they'd built. At one point, Harper stopped near the kettle corn booth where Eugene was serving a long line of customers. Eugene saw her and waved. Harper, come here. She walked over and Eugene handed her a bag of kettle corn. On the house, he said, for saving my business last year and for bringing me back this year. Harper took the bag, touched. You earned your spot, Eugene. I just made sure the rules were fair. Still, I won't forget what you did. Harper thanked him and walked away with Miles, eating kettle corn straight from the bag. You know what's funny? Harper said. What? I spent so long fighting just to prove I could do this, and now I get to actually enjoy it. Miles looked at her. You deserve to enjoy it. Harper stopped walking and turned to face him. The festival buzzed around them, music, laughter, the smell of food and summer heat. But in that moment, all Harper saw was the man who'd stumbled into her tent by accident and stayed by choice. I'm really glad you picked the wrong campsite, she said. Miles grinned. Me too. They kissed in the middle of the festival, surrounded by people and noise and the thing they'd built together, and Harper felt something settle deep in her chest. Not the relief of finishing a fight, but the quiet satisfaction of knowing she'd found her place, her work, her person. Later that evening, when the festival was winding down and volunteers were starting cleanup, Harper stood near the river with Miles beside her. The water moved slow and steady, just like it had that first morning when she'd made coffee for a stranger. "What are you thinking about?" Miles asked. Harper watched the light fade over the meadow. "I'm thinking about how much has changed and how much hasn't." "Like what?" "Like the fact that you still drink terrible coffee without complaining. And I still plan everything down to the last detail. And we still work really well together." Miles smiled. "Some things are worth keeping." "Yeah, they are." They stood in comfortable silence, and Harper thought about the path that had brought them here. The mistakes and the fighting and the choice to keep showing up even when it was hard. She thought about the key Miles had given her, and the consulting work she was starting, and the festivals she'd coordinate in the future. She thought about all the variables she couldn't control and the few she could. And she realized that for the first time in a long time, she wasn't planning for disaster. She was planning for possibility. "You ready to head back?" Miles asked. Harper looked at the festival one last time, the lights glowing in the gathering dark, the people still scattered across the meadow, the things she'd built standing solid and real. "Yeah," she said. "I'm ready." They walked back together, coffee between them like a ritual, and Harper knew that whatever came next, whether it was another festival, another fight, or just another ordinary morning, she wouldn't be facing it alone. She had systems, she had documentation, she had work that mattered, and she had someone who'd made her coffee when he could have walked away. That was enough. That was everything.